All right, a tradition unlike any other. Thanks for watching The Sweat. I am Emerson. She is Jessie. And we are here every night at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, helping you fine folks at home gear up for the night and week ahead in daily fantasy sports. Simply put, in the words of the great non-dramatic Jimmy Butler, you bleeping need me. You can't win without me.
And by me, he means us. And we're coming out swinging with our NFL panel, all about Emerson. Good evening to DK Live's Reed Fowler, Steve Buchanan, and Gary and Thorne. Gentlemen, it's time to play some price check. Will the following players return value on their Week 6 salary?
Starting under center, where Kirk Cousins makes a $700 jump to $6,700.
You like that?
Yes, I do, and so does he.
Cool.
Maybe. Facing the Cardinals at home, why or why not does this price tag work for you? Go ahead, Reed.
I feel like I'm on the MLB or the baseball panel with these two guys, so I got to make sure I have my facts straight.
Yeah, you better bring it.
Yeah, I'm going to say no here. I think at the second highest price guy, what you want to do against the Cardinals is you want to run the ball. They're number one, giving up the most DK fantasy points to opposing running backs. Now, it doesn't mean that guys like Cousins or Thielen or Diggs can't get theirs, but Arizona has been pretty decent against the pass and against the quarterbacks, and probably because of that is because how bad and putrid they've been against the run. Also, too, Arizona gives up or plays some of the slowest football on the slate or just in general in the NFL with only 49 plays per game. So when you look at overall that times that Cousins needs to pass or needs to keep these games going, look, he's hit 30-plus DK fantasy points in games that have been fast against the Rams, against the Green Bay Packers, not against the guys like Cardinals. So I'm going to say no, this price doesn't it doesn't work for me.
Steve, how did Reed do there?
Reed did very well. That was very good by Reed. I mean, you tell me that, Cousins is the second most expensive quarterback on this slate, and I just feel deflated and defeated here. I mean, that's not something I want to pay up for, especially when you look at some of the other guys at other positions that are highly priced. I mean, look at Antonio Brown in a smash spot this week. Mike Evans in a great spot. Todd Gurley, 10,000 this week. I mean, if you're going to be paying up somewhere, Cousins is not the way to do it. And as Reed alluded to, I mean, against quarterbacks, they've allowed the seventh DK fantasy points against quarterback, just fourth for wide receivers. I mean, GPPs, sure, you could play Cousins, pair him up with Thielen, who probably has the best individual matchup. Yeah, Cousins, paying up for Cousins this week just doesn't make a lot of sense.
How much sense does it make to you, Garion? $6,700 for this guy.
Yeah, I can't do it. I mean, in a general sense, I'm not one who often pays up at quarterback anyway. And I mean, you could even simplify this more and say that I'm definitely not playing Cousins if Dalvin Cook is active for this game. I might consider it in a GPP if he's not, just because the Vikings have been so prone to pass the football without Cook in the lineup. They've got like a 75% pass ratio for the season. That's the highest in the NFL. But Arizona, their defense is actually all right. It's just that their offense continues to put them in terrible situation after terrible situation. Like by Pro Football Focus, they have two top 10 coverage cornerbacks. Everyone focuses on Patrick Peterson, as you're wont to do, but Benwecky's been pretty good too on the other corners. So I just feel like this isn't a great spot to attack at that price point. I'd rather pay down for like Jameis Winston, maybe even Baker Mayfield. I just don't want to pay up a quarterback this week.
Hey, Steve, you actually mentioned it. The highest priced player on the entire slate is Rams running back Todd Gurley. He's going to cost you $10,000. Yeah, LA hits the road to face Denver, so is he worth the dough, Steve?
It's almost like I knew that segment was coming up next, and I gave
crazy.
a little tease there.
But he's been
Wow.
I mean, look,
doing
if there's a running back in the game you're going to pay $10K for, it has to be Gurley, right? I mean, but this is what really comes down to it, what's important. What is the health status of Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks? Because that's going to make all the difference here. I mean, if let's just say both of them are out, that's going to leave Jared Goff with the likes of Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds, and Tyler Higbee, who individually has a great matchup against the Broncos because they're absolutely terrible against opposing tight ends. And then you look at what Gurley has done all season long. He's hit 3x value every week this season, although he's just barely done it the majority of the time. But when you're paying $10K for somebody, you better make sure that he is going to be the focal point of this offense. That's why it's really important that Kupp and Cooks, what their status is. So I feel like if you're going to play him, we have to really figure it out by Friday when that final injury report comes out.
Reed, what do you think when you're looking at this? Are you willing to pay $10,000 for Todd Gurley?
Yeah, I agree with Steve here. I mean, if you look at the ancillary parts, like like Woods. I mean, he is someone that you like to see probably with Cooks and Kupp out, someone that you'd like to see. But Gurley at 10,000, he's right. Like, the only other player that you would want at this price is Alvin Kamara sans Mark Ingram. Obviously, that's not the case. So Todd Gurley is the only person outside of maybe one other guy like AB who belongs at this price tag. But he better give you number one numbers because he's 20% of your salary cap. If you look at Denver, he's right. They funnel everything to the middle, right? Crowell and Powell did numbers on these guys that maybe that was traveling out east on a short week. But these guys are 9th best for opposing running backs. So if you want to play him, sure, that's fine. But Tyler Higbee does present something. Steve is right. You got to see that these guys aren't going to be playing, because then that focal point of that offense is Todd Gurley, and with the attempts and the ability for that guy to get in the red zone and get attempts in the red zone, that's money. So yeah, I would, just in case those guys are out.
Gary, and Gurley's up $600 from last week. Is he in a good enough spot to be worth the money?
I mean, it does seem like it's early coach speak, so that's the worst kind of coach speak. But it seems like he is confident that both these receivers are going to be active. So that's, again, something to watch as the week unfolds. I'll say that I would pay maybe $12,000 for Todd Gurley in a cash game. Like, he is a cash game staple at this point. In a GPP, this might seem a little rich for me. I mean, he's almost $1,700 more than any other running back on the slate. That's a lot of money for, talented running backs in good spots this week. And, you just look at the way he's been utilized. Jesse's hyper involved in the passing game as well. And if those two receivers don't play, we could expect even more of that. But Denver, I think the travel is interesting here. I mean, they're averaging 100 yards fewer on the ground allowed when they get to play in Denver as opposed to having to travel. I feel like that's a viable stat. That's something you kind of have to look into. I think Gurley is going to be fine. I just don't know if he can hit value in a GPP here at this amount of money. But again, cash game lock.
All right, well, Gary, and A.J. Green is also going to cost you this week $8,000. Bengals host the Steelers. We have the ingredients here for another shootout between these two. You feel good dropping this change on Green?
He's fine. I mean, I think one of the guys I'd rather pay down for going back to quarterback is Andy Dalton. And we've been doing this for a half decade now. This is the most easy stack in fantasy football. It's Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. But I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I'd rather spend $100 less on Julio Jones. I know we're playing this stupid game of when's he going to score a goddamn touchdown. I think it's this week. I mean, the Bucs have just hemorrhaged touchdowns to wide receiver one option so far this season. They're allowing 2.3 to wide receivers per game. I just think that where A.J. Green, I mean, Joe Hayden just started shadowing sort of like in the last 2 weeks. And, Green historically has great numbers at home against the Steelers, but he's never had to face Joe Hayden, who, when Hayden was with the Browns, did some damage for A.J. Green. So I'm not saying he's in a bad spot. I just think there's other receivers around Green I'm more apt to pay for and kind of pivot off him.
Steve heard your reaction. They're dropping an oh boy on us.
Yeah, last week I was so tired of David Johnson. This week I'm so tired of Julio Jones. I mean, it's just another guy, another week. It's all that it is. But what I really like about what they're doing with A.J. Green is they're just playing him all over the field right now. I mean, obviously he's lining up on the sides as he usually does, but 27% of his snaps has come out of the slot. And I think that's really interesting because last season he didn't see more than 10 snaps per game in the slot, and he's already done so in double digits 4 times already in the past 4 weeks. So they're trying to get him in the slot there, and that also opens up some soft coverage for, across the team. Tyler Boyd, I think, is in a great option because if Hayden is going to be shadowing Green, that's going to give some softer coverage for Boyd. So the Steelers haven't committed to if they're going to be shadowing him or not. And obviously we're not going to find that out. They're not going to go, yep, this is going to be our game plan. But I mean, yeah, like Julian said, I'm sorry, Garion. Oh man,
whoa, wow, Freudian slip.
That's a low blow, dude. That is a low blow.
That is such an insult. I am so sorry, Garion. Like from the bottom of my heart, that was bad. I am sorry. But as the Steelers, as Garion said, the Steelers have just started shadowing. It was their first time last week. They did that with Julio Jones, so there's no definitely guarantee if they're going to do so. But I do feel like Green's in a great spot here. I love him. He was in the NFL cheat sheet, so obviously I'm a big fan of his.
Hey, Reed, he's only had one game with less than 17.8 DK fantasy points. Is that enough to convince you to pay $8,000 for him?
I'm not going to be on him at $8,000. I agree with Gary here. Julio Jones, I know we talked about him ad nauseum this week in terms of that matchup that he has against Tampa Bay. That's the number one team that he has the most touchdowns against. I think it's around 10 against Tampa Bay. He torches these guys. Tampa Bay cannot stop Julio Jones. And so if you want to pay a little bit less, I would be apt to do that. And the Joe Hayden shadow thing is something to really consider as well, because if you look at the games that he's gone up against Joe Hayden, only one really has he had a successful game. I think 7 receptions, 135 yards. But all the other ones, about 6 or 7 of them, have averaged around 6 receptions for 50 yards. So is a little pedestrian in terms of paying up for a guy at $8,000. I think if you want to pay up for someone, we talked about it, Gurley, someone that obviously you can. There's other spots that I'd rather pay down to, one being Julio, especially if I'm paying up at receiver as opposed to AJ Green.
All right, guys, we've got Jared Cook rising up to a season-high $5K as the Raiders host Seattle. He's had 2 games with 30-plus points, while his other 3 games were in the single digits. So how confident are you he returns value this weekend, Reed?
I think he does. I mean, when we have Eric Ebron as a number 1 or the highest priced tight end on the slate, it scares me quite a bit. So if I'm paying down for someone, Jared Cook is someone, if I'm attacking those top 3 guys in terms of salary, he's someone that I like, especially against Seattle, who really, in terms of the stat sheet, looks like they're pretty good against tight end, but the guys that they play, Tyler Higbee, Ricky Seals-Jones, Jeff Swain, Trey Burton is someone that obviously is good, but Jake Butt, week 1, these tight ends don't really scare anyone at all. So Seattle's defense, when you look at what they've done in terms of their run defense and just in the middle, they've been hemorrhaging. I think they're 29th against the run. But in terms of tight end, they haven't reached, or they haven't played someone in terms of Jared Cook's talent. I think he is a mismatch. Even if you bring a secondary guy down or you try to line him up against a linebacker, he's a mismatch. So if I'm paying up for a guy, it's going to be him. If not, Austin Hooper, Cam Brate are the guys that I'm paying down for. But at the top, if you want to go spin, Jared Cook is the guy that I would do.
Steve, he's up $200 from last week. How do you feel about him this weekend?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of what Reed said, we really haven't seen what this Seattle defense can do against opposing tight ends. I mean, they're seeing less than 6 targets a game all week, all season long, and they haven't faced anybody that's really considered worth, what they can do there. And they're averaging just 9.3 DK fantasy points a game to opposing tight ends. But like Reed said, there's some good options lower. Austin Hooper, 3,500. I loved him last week. Now he faces the Steelers, who have arguably been one of the worst teams against opposing tight ends. I mentioned Tyler Higbee too as well, especially if Cooks or Kupp is out. That can definitely be a good spot for him here. I wouldn't say that Cook is expensive at $5,000, but I would just save some salary here with all the good names that are in good spots here with Gurley, Evans, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones. I mean, roll my eyes. There's just too many good guys that are expensive that are in good spots. I don't feel the need $5,000 for Jared Cook.
Gary, do you agree that $5,000 for a tight end in this situation just too much?
Yeah, it's a little cause and effect, too. I mean, we need someone to be priced at $5,000. And the way this slate breaks down is just so strange for tight end with Philadelphia, New England, and the Kansas City Chiefs all playing in primetime. We lose easily the 3 best tight ends in football. So it seems like Cook's value rose not because of his own personal situation, just the situation of the slate. And that's not money I want to be paying for, where, again, not to keep repeating everyone's points here, but there are lots of tight ends in value spots this week. CJ Uzomah is a nice spot. Cam Brate is in a nice spot in these games with totals around 55 points. Those are situations for about $1,500 less that I think I'm going to be investing in.
Alrighty, thank you, friends. We will roll through the fantasy impact of some NFL injuries with you coming up and Dr. P. But first, we're helping you decide who to roster tonight in the NHL right after these messages from Adam Levitan.
Sharp or dumb to fade coach speak, i.e. Joe Mixon will be in a timeshare, when trying to find the best plays for cash? Yeah, we have to take coach speak on a case-by-case basis. We have to think about what makes sense. We have to know the history of coaches. We also have to know the history of beat reporters. There's a lot of feel on this stuff. A lot of coaches just always default to team stuff, to building up their players through the media, to creating an environment of competition through the media. So, when Jay Gruden gets up in front of 50 cameras and says, yeah, Adrian Peterson's a 3-down back. Of course he's going to say that. He's not going to bury the guy and say, well, Adrian Peterson sucks in the pass game. We're not going to use him there. But in reality, when he says Adrian Peterson's going to be a 3-down back, we should know to ignore that. Other times, over this past summer when Adam Gase says Frank Gore is going to play a big role, well, that probably does make sense. Coaches love Frank Gore. and Adam Gase is a dunce. In the specific case of Joe Mixon, I did waffle a bit. I wrote about Mixon in leverage, thought he was an awesome play with Gio Bernard out. The clear-cut evidence, the actual hard evidence, not the coach speak to me, was Mixon seemed somewhat close to playing in week 4. He actually chased down AJ Green in the end zone in week 4 and tackled him, which you wouldn't have done if you're worried about your knee. Practiced fully on Friday ahead of week 5, wasn't even on the final injury report. Cincinnati has not trusted Mark Walton or Thomas Rawls at all. So that was all fact-based evidence. And the quote from Marvin Lewis was he wasn't worried about Joe Mixon's knee at all. He was worried about conditioning. But that doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, once you get into a game and Mixon is out there, he practiced all week, his conditioning is fine. There's so much breaks between plays. I don't really see how these guys could really get tired. So the only time I actually waffled on Mixon was when they decided to activate Thomas Rawls, which they hadn't done the previous 2 games, giving them 3 running backs active. That was scary for sure, and not coach speak. That was actually action. So that, again, spots where it could be tough. But yeah, I think over time, if you play enough, you follow the news enough, if you follow coaches and beat reporters enough, you'll get a good handle on what makes sense.
The pursuit of Lord Stanley is in full swing,
it's
and
early.
it's still in full swing.
Yes,
all right,
it is.
It's always go time.
Little back
It's
swing.
make a noise. Nope, that's not the noise Buck makes. All right, we've got our NHL panel here to drop some stone cold knowledge on you peeps. Say hello to DK Live's Jeff Ulrich and the Action Network's Joe Holka. You know where you can find that Action Network app, iPhones and Androids.
Yep, someone should tell Matt LaMarca that.
Yeah.
All right, the name of the game, gentlemen, is Face Off. Basically, we face off the top choices at each position against each other. You're going to tell us what you prefer. So, Jeff, it's only a 3-game slate. There's no huge names at center tonight because you got Ryan Getzlaf, this top price, but day-to-day with an injury. So the top 2 left are Flyers Sean Couturier at 6,500, and then you got the Capitals, Evgeny Kuznetsov at 6,200. So which one speaks to you?
I mean, I like Kuznetsov, but I got to go with Couturier here. The matchup's just a little bit too hard to ignore. Both of these teams, they played multiple times last year. I think they averaged something like 7 or 8 goals per game. And then you look at the matchup for Washington, and it's a tougher matchup. I mean, the Golden Knights haven't started well, but the Kuznetsov line's probably going to see a lot of Vegas' second line, which is actually pretty solid with Pacioretty and Zula on it. So I think that the way the Flyers offense is just so focused on their first line, they get a ton of power play minutes. Couturier is kind of like the main center there too. I think you'd have to lean Couturier in this matchup. There's just more upside, in my opinion, for a big night.
Yeah, he followed up 5.5 fantasy points on Saturday with just half a point last night against San Jose. Joe, where are you going in this situation?
This one's really close. I do agree with you, though. I think this highbreaker has to be the matchup for Couturier. Ottawa, 3rd most shots against so far this year, 8th most goals against. So definitely think I'm fine paying that extra 300 for Couturier because of that matchup. Like you said, it's been a rough start for Vegas, but I still think it's a pretty good spot for Philly.
All right, guys, pickings may be slim for centers, but we got some star power at wing.
Yeah, we do.
Ovechkin at 7,800 or Vegas Jonathan Marchessault at 7,100. Joe, who tickles your fancy?
Yeah, small slate like this, I think you have to pay up for Ovi. Marchessault's a little bit dinged up as well. He missed Tuesday's practice. So Vegas 1 and 2 to start the year. It's just more of a floor play for me on a small slate. I just really like the safety that comes with Ovechkin. So I think that's the direction I would go at the high end at wing.
Jeff, you want to pay $7,800 for Ovechkin?
Ooh.
I mean, I'll just make a small argument for Marchessault. It's not really where I would go, but he might actually have the better matchup. Again, he might get matched up against Washington's second line, which in my opinion is a pluser matchup than Vegas' second line for Ovechkin. But at the same time, it's only $700 more to get to Ovechkin. And, we just mentioned that Marchessault might be a little banged up. I think you just pay up, and especially on a short slate. Yeah, I agree with that. So I just take Ovechkin in this spot. It's just not a big enough salary difference.
Well, on the defensive end, guys, Karlsson is head and shoulders, knees and toes above everyone else. So we'll go down to the next 2. That would be Philly's Shane Gostisbehere at $5,700 or Ducks D-man Cam Fowler, $5,500. Jeff, who do you prefer? Please tell me. I
prefer Gostisbehere. I mean, again, not only because of the salary difference, but I mean, it's the Philly power play, right? I mean, he's the main. He's always out there with the first unit. Let's put it that way. So you don't have to guess. Then you have like a bottom 5 team power play killing unit in Ottawa. So I like Cam Fowler, but they have injuries up front. There is still, Lindholm can get involved there too on the power play. So his role isn't quite as defined. I think Fowler should be a little bit cheaper than this. And considering their salaries are almost equal, I have to go with Gostisbehere. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, he found the score sheet with a goal during last night's loss to San Jose, but how concerned about high ownership are you for him, Jeff?
I just think on a short slate, you just don't worry about this play.
Okay.
I just feel like his upside is so big in this spot, and he started out well, and he's averaging like over 4 shots per game. I would just pay up for him personally. I wouldn't worry about ownership. He can go get fancy in other places.
Joe, forget ownership. You paying up for him?
I'm with you. Ghost for me as well. I would love to disagree with you, but I think this is probably one of the more lopsided ones we had today. As far as our shot prediction metric that we have over at Fantasy Legs, we have Gostisbehere pegged for the most shots of any other defenseman today. It makes a decent amount of sense. 94th percentile guy over the past year. And again, it's just such a great spot for Philly. 5,700 still feels kind of like a bargain there.
6 shots last night, I believe, right?
Pretty good.
If my research proves me right.
Yeah,
it's a lot of shots.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, Jeff.
The internet. All right, finally, Joe, in goal, we look to the most intriguing matchup of the night, a Stanley Cup rematch between Braden Holtby at 7,800 and Marc-Andre Fleury at 7,500. Who are you going to take here?
Yeah, I'm on Holtby today, second largest favorite on the slate. Vegas has given up, or has had the 8th most shots for. So they haven't been scoring a lot of goals, though, is a problem. 27th in most goals to start the year. So a team that's shooting a lot, not scoring a ton, big favorite. I definitely think that Holtby is the play at home.
Jeff, Joe's going with Holtbeast. What you doing?
It's pretty hard to make an argument for Marc-Andre Fleury here, to be honest. You could be scared off of Holtby because he let in 7 goals in his last start, I guess. And there's a contrarian factor on a short slate. I just don't think this is a spot. Maybe if this was at home, but again, you look at the odds. He's a pretty big favorite, to be honest. So I can't make an argument the other way. I think you just take Holtby and move on between these two.
Hey, Jeff, slate approved time. Who's your lock for tonight's slate?
I would have to go with Gostisbehere. He probably rates out as my favorite play on the slate. I think if you do want to get a little bit fancy, I'll throw out Sam Steele on Anaheim. They have a lot of injuries up front. He's seeing first-line power play and is only 4,400, excuse me.
You are excused. Joe?
Yeah, I love the ghost call. Can my lock of the night just be that the Coyotes finally score their first goal?
Joe, get creative here, man. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I'll go with that same team, though. I'll go with Derek Stepan at 4,200. As a team, they haven't scored, but they have been shooting the puck a ton, actually at the 6th highest rate in the league. So Stepan had 9 shots in his last game against this exact same Ducks team, highest shot prediction in our models of all the centermen today. So 4,200 seems like a really solid play, even though they had a small team total.
Rock and roll.
All right, thanks, Puck guys. We've got more NFL on the way when the sweat returns.
I'm Brendan Glasheen with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Earlier Wednesday, the Jaguars officially ruled out Leonard Fournette for Sunday's tilt in Week 6 with the Cowboys. Jack's signing Jamal Charles causes concern about Fournette. Perhaps it's a small stopgap to bridge to the healthy star running back down the road. Anywho, the Jags turn to TJ Yeldon once again out of the backfield. He's put up stellar numbers the last 2 weeks, north of 24 DK points in each game. The thing is, Yeldon's salary has shot up from $5,600 in Week 5 to $6,400 in Week 6. His production has certainly helped, as well as the injuries to Fournette and Corey Grant, who was recently placed on IR. Yeldon can certainly keep things going, despite the Cowboys' respectable secondary this season. If Yeldon's in line for, 10 targets like he had last week against the Chiefs, he is definitely worth consideration, as long as Blake Bortles just doesn't screw it up.
Welcome back to The Sweat, where every single night we give you someone to blame for your awful fantasy decisions.
To be clear, it's not us. It would be Reed Fowler, Steve Buchanan, and Garion Thorne. But we also have a real doctor on the show, Dr. Seelan Parekh. Thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to talk to you about some of these injuries. So we're ripping through those NFL injury reports and the fantasy impact those will have on your team.
All right, Doc, you're up first. Jags running back Corey Grant suffered a Liz Frank injury and is now out for the season. I am an idiot, so is Jessie. So can you explain what exactly a Liz Frank injury is? Because we both thought it was pronounced
Liz Frank.
Yeah, we were giving it a nice
look it up.
French twist
Liz
to it.
Frank?
Well, you wouldn't be so far off calling it Liz Frank, because if you lived in Paris, that's where it originated from. It was a French term, a French surgeon. But if you look at the bottom of your foot, from the big toe to the second toe, there's a critical ligament here known as a Liz Frank or Liz Frank ligament, as we call it here in the U.S. That gives you major stability to the whole undersurface arch of your foot. Without it, the whole arch splays apart, and actually your whole foot will kind of turn out. So it is a very big function for a tiny little ligament. And so when you have a tear of that ligament and it's unstable, that requires surgery where plates and screws are put more on the top of the foot to help stabilize that area and allow it time to heal. But you're looking at about 6 to 8 months before returning to play.
Reed, 6 to 8 months, and there's going to be screws in there. I don't know if that's ever going to be the same. Yeldon is obviously the play here, but is he too chalky, or maybe someone who isn't even a sure thing necessarily?
Yeah, $6,400 is a lot for Yeldon. And again, sort of like taking a segment or taking what Garion said in a previous segment, this might be just really in terms of his spot, right? He's the only guy there. You know, you bring in Jamal Charles for some insurance until Fournette comes back. Fournette may be out until week 10 after that week 9 bye. So you need someone to be that bell cow guy. 28 attempts and 13 targets over the last 2 games. That's something that you can probably project to see from Yeldon. Like last game was more game script where you saw a huge amount of targets, but 18 attempts against the Giants is something that you really like. And volume and targets and attempts obviously is the only correlation that you can make towards fantasy success. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a sure thing. You're going to eat about 20% or 15% around their chalk. But in terms of what they have, he's the only guy right now, and he's a dual threat in terms of pass catching and running. So yeah, I think it's a okay play there.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, Yeldon seems like the obvious play, but Corey Grant out, Leonard Fournette also out. So, I mean, do you eat the chalk on this one?
Well, first, I was lucky enough to write up the Corey Grant injury, so I like to confirm that the doctor is right on what the injury is.
Oh, thank God.
Thank you, Dr. Steve.
Thank God we have your confirmation.
He's a meteorologist and a doctor. Huge.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so look, we look at Yeldon here, and on the surface, it looks like the Cowboys have been good against the run. They've only allowed the Seahawks to rush for over 100 yards this season. Where they're getting burned right now is through the air. I mean, opposing backs have caught 37 of 44 targets. Granted, that's a little inflated by what Saquon Barkley did against them, but the numbers are still the numbers here. And without Fournette on the field, Bortles throws on 62% of the snaps this season, which I think's helped the cause for Yeldon to get some of those checkdowns, get some of those targets. So I don't mind his price point here. I think the matchup is a lot softer than people are giving it credit for. So I like Yeldon in this spot.
Garion, do you agree with these guys?
Yeah, I think this is chalk I'm willing to eat. I mean, like Steve said, you can pass against this Cowboys defense as a running back, and that's really the area where Corey Grant was cutting into Yeldon's prospective volume. So in a way, it's kind of nice that this clears things up. I mean, I only think Charles plays at most 15 snaps in this game. So you're still looking at a majority, probably 75 to 80% volume share for TJ Yeldon. And Yeldon's already a guy who, despite the fact he hasn't been starting the entire season, has the 6th most passing down snaps among running backs in the NFL. He will be highly involved in this passing game. And as Steve pointed out, over the last 3 weeks, basically without Leonard Fournette, the Jaguars are throwing the ball on 67% of their downs. So in a full-point PPR, I'm perfectly fine with this play.
All right, 49ers running back Matt Breida is out this week with an ankle injury, but good news is it's not a high ankle injury. So that high ankle sprain was originally what they feared it was.
Yep.
And a high ankle sprain is more concerning because why, Dr. P?
Yeah, actually, I was one of the guys who believed that this was going to be a high ankle sprain, if not a fracture, based on Matt's response on the field with the injury. So if you look at the ankle itself, a low ankle sprain is down here. A high ankle sprain involves kind of the upper ligaments here. It's much more intense, much higher energy, and much longer for this ligament up here to quiet down to allow an athlete to get back on the playing field. So for a high ankle sprain, it's about 4 to 6 weeks to return to play. When it's a low ankle sprain, you're looking anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. So it's a much better scenario for the 49ers.
All right, so what interest do you have in the San Francisco running game without Breida, Steve?
I mean, you're going to probably get the volume with Morris, but I mean, what upside does he have at this juncture? I mean, he's really just touchdown dependent at this point, and that's really what you're going to be hoping for here if you get him on your roster. The matchup really isn't that great against the Packers either. So if you're playing this game for showdown mode, then sure. I mean, definitely take a look at Morris here. But if you're playing the Thursday through Monday slate, no, he's not on your radar at all.
Are you on board with that, Garion?
Yeah, and I think part of this does have to do with the specialty slate. If you're playing a Thursday to Monday slate, I mean, I could see Gurley and Morris being a decent cash game pairing because there is just going to be like 45 guaranteed touches between those two running backs, and their prices kind of counteract each other. But you're talking about like Chris Carson, who's getting a decent amount of work right now in Seattle, and they're running the ball 57% of the time across the last 3 weeks. You're talking about both Philadelphia running backs being priced lower than Alfred Morris and probably each having a higher ceiling, or I wouldn't even be shocked if both outscored Alfred Morris when it was all said and done. So I think I'd be avoiding him in GPPs despite the fact that I think you can pencil in about 20 touches in this game.
No, Breida, you on that Alfred Morris train, Reed?
I just agree with what these guys are saying. I mean, Carl Juszczyk, guy that wasn't mentioned yet as a fullback, but he's seeing a lot of the pass attempts or the volume in that sense. And even then, you can't really project a fullback getting a ton of targets. Shanahan is still going to throw the ball. I think that is something that we've seen. They should be either projected to be down in a lot of games, but you really aren't going to be able to attack any of this or with confidence say that Alf Morris, yes, he's going to get the volume, but is it good volume that he's going to get? His yards per carry is down. He's not going to really wow you with anything. So like Steve was saying, if you're playing that showdown, if you're playing the Thursday through Monday slate, there's way more areas that I'd rather go. I mean, George Kittle, maybe CJ Beathard are the only two guys that you project something, but even then it's not any sort of success that you're willing to bank on. So no.
All right, well, let's go to T.Y. Hilton, who is listed as week-to-week with a hamstring strain. So, Dr. P, if he's week-to-week, what determines whether or not he can play in a given week?
So I got a nice model here for you of the hamstring from the inside, looking all the way from the buttocks down to the knee. And you can see it's a big group of muscles. These muscles need time to heal. And so what you're looking for to get these guys back to playing is decrease of pain, increasing mobility and agility, and having about 80% or more of the power of the other limb. If you've got that, they're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, you got to be careful.
Shredded leg you got there.
Got to be careful with those hamstrings. Yeah, like 0% body fat on that guy.
Yep, I know.
All right, Garion, do you like the value of one Colts wide receiver more than others? Guys like Rodgers, Grant, or like Pascal?
I don't have any fancy models, but I can just do this, which is 22. That's the amount of targets that Chester Rogers has across the last 2 weeks.
Wow, Gary, that was great.
Play in the slot against Buster Screen. In Buster Screen, I hope his mom isn't watching right now. Your son's not any good at football. He's got 2.52 yards per route covered so far this season. That is among the worst marks in all of football. And he's also allowed 75% of the targets thrown his way to be completed. I mean, this is just a crush matchup for Chester Rogers.
Steve, that's like super, super bad. So what do you think?
Actually, yeah, his mom just commented. Yeah, she's not happy.
His mom was like, what the F?
I mean, the info it is. I mean, sorry, Mom. I mean, he's just really not that good. So we talk about what Gary just said. He has 22 targets in the past 2 weeks. He's 4,500. I mean, take the name away and say, yeah, this guy has had 22 targets in the past 2 weeks. He's 4,500. You're going to play him? Yep. Yes, you are. And the thing with Pascal is that just the eyeball test, he couldn't catch anything last week. And it wasn't just, some couple bad tosses here and there. He had 7 targets last week. He should have caught at least 3 or 4 of those. I mean, he just did not look good. And I think he's going to start losing some snaps because of that. Because like I said, there were some catchable balls that he just could not get any completions on. And like Gary said again, Buster Screen. I mean, he's just been something I've been targeting against, I feel like, all season long already. And this is just going to be another week. So this is a smash spot for Chester Rogers. He's just too cheap to ignore.
Reed, are you on the Rogers train like these guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Buster Screen, I mean, he probably belongs in that Jalen Mills conversation as well as guys that you always target to see who that guy across the line of scrimmage is going up against. These guys, I mean, Buster Screen is number 94 ranked in PFF. I mean, this guy gives up huge games. You saw week 1 against Golden Tate. Manny Sanders also had a decent game. and that Broncos offense that's not really doing that well. So when you have a guy like Buster Skrine or Chester Rogers going up against him, 22 targets is great. I mean, Andrew Luck is throwing 60-plus times, right? So if you have Ebron out there as a number one tight end at that high price, you have a guy who's less than that who should be seeing a ton of targets. Chester Rogers, fire him up.
All right, guys, despite suffering a chest injury in Week 5 against the Cowboys, Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson says he's for sure playing against the Bills. Dr. P, how could a chest injury slow down Watson? I'm just, that seems like that would be an issue. Ugh. Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, well, I was really concerned watching the game with Deshaun because the medics were starting to listen to his lungs in the back of the chest. So if you look at the chest wall, you've got the ribs, but inside the rib cage, you've got the lungs on either side. The fact that they were listening to his chest wall made me concerned that either he had a broken rib that punctured his lung or that his lung kind of punctured on its own. The good news is that it turns out that the reports show that he has not had either of those scenarios. It's just a chest bruise. So barring all the hits that he had last week, and hopefully he doesn't take those kind of hits this week, he should be okay to go. But if he takes one bad hit that cracks a rib, now you're looking at a bigger effect on his play this weekend.
Dr. P, you must just have like the best Halloween decorations. Spooky month, just like skeletons everywhere.
Mr. Bones, he's my buddy here.
Mr. Bones.
Yeah, shout out to Mr. B.
Yeah, what up, man?
We appreciate you, guy. All right, what do you like about Watson's matchup this week, Reed? I remember you saying under 25 fantasy points for him yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what he's done after Week 1, he's outperformed his projections ever since Week 2. And Deshaun Watson is someone that we like to fire up because of that offense, because they can't run the ball. This is another thing. They're just passing a ton, and their defense isn't really scaring anyone. So if you look at Buffalo as well, yes, they're playing better. Yes, they're more optimistic than what we've seen after those first 2 games. But if you look at Watson, he is a tide that rises all ships. I mean, that's how not confident they are in Brandon Weeden or TJ Yates or whoever's going to back up Watson, that even with this guy's injury, he's still someone that is going to be playing. He's still someone that has thrown over 300 yards in all those games since Week 2. So I do like this matchup. It is scary, though, that if he gets hit the wrong way, then this team, all of those guys, maybe except for DeAndre Hopkins, you have to downgrade.
Yeah, a banged-up Watson. Do you like him against Buffalo, Steve?
I mean, it's a tough matchup on paper. I mean, the Bills have done really well against opposing quarterbacks this season. I mean, they can't score for anything, but they're also trying to, holding down the scoring for everybody else as well. They're averaging just 17 DK fantasy points allowed so far this season. But one thing they really haven't been tested against is they haven't really faced a mobile quarterback yet. If you look at who they've faced, I mean, yeah, you could put Mariota on that list, but he was injured, so they really haven't been tested against that. And he does have that rushing ability. He's averaging about 40 per game right now. Now, that's not going to make all the difference, but is definitely going to make a difference. The only thing I don't like about his price point in this matchup here is that you spend up another 100, you get Andy Dalton. You spend down 100, you get Ben Roethlisberger. So it puts it in one of those perspectives that if I'm going to choose between the 3, Watson is number 3. We're figuring that matchup that the other 2 guys have there. So Watson can absolutely get it done. He's probably going to be low owned on the week, but I think I'd rather go with the short matchups with either one of those other guys.
Yeah, Gary, and my feeling is you're going to pay an extra 100 here and go up to Dalton.
I mean, I like Dalton, but I think what Steve said rings true in the reverse. I think that you can pivot off of these 2 guys and go with Deshaun Watson. And the thing with the Bills is their offense is so inept that it does create opportunities for opposing quarterbacks. Now, they've only allowed a touchdown on 3 of the last 33 drives they've seen as a defense, but they have the worst yards per drive as an offense at under 20, and they have the 2nd lowest drive success rate in the NFL. So Houston's going to have opportunities. They're going to have volume on offense, and for as bad as they've been in the red zone, they've still gotten to the red zone more than any other team in the AFC. They've got 4.4 red zone scoring drives per game. I mean, at some point, regression is going to kick in, and they're going to get a couple of these touchdowns that they should have been getting the past couple of weeks. And I think this could be the week. I like Watson a lot.
All right, that'll do it for now, gentlemen. We appreciate the time, and thank you again, Dr. P. So,
yeah, Mr. Bones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bones. We'll see you guys again in about 8 minutes. We're talking NBA ADPs right after Pat Mayo spills the beans on some big-name running backs.
Go through the rankings. At the very top, we got Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, James Conner. Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, David Johnson, Saquon Barkley on Thursday night. Back spasms looks like it was just a spasm. No big deal. And then TJ Yeldon at number 10. That goes into the Patriots running backs. White and Michelle, Lynch, then Hyde, Dalvin Cook, Jordan Howard, Devonta Freeman, Chris Thompson, Chris Carson, and Dion Lewis. Jake, if I'm going to insert Adrian Peterson as if he's going to play, should I move Chris Thompson around, put Adrian Peterson in? What do you think?
Yeah, so I initially had Chris Thompson highlighted because I saw you didn't have Adrian Peterson in, and I would say he needed to be higher without Adrian Peterson in. So now I actually think that's not that bad of a spot. I mean, really, we're talking full point PPR with your rankings as always. And to be honest, I mean, you're talking about the split. The split backfield of the Seahawks is not going to be that successful every single week where both of them end up being that useful in top 15. So if you're telling me in a full point PPR with Adrian Peterson still nursing a shoulder issue and in a matchup where I think it'll still be somewhat pass heavy, I think Chris Thompson, if anything, moves back 2 or 3, maybe behind Philip Lindsay, but that's about it.
So I drop him from like 18 to 22. What do you think? Would you play Shady or Chris Thompson this week, Aaron?
I'd play Chris Thompson. I mean, Shady, we at least saw him get a role.
There was life.
Resembled something we assumed he would have earlier in the season.
Okay, but people are now saying, like, there's no doubt LaShawn McCoy is going to be traded to the Eagles. I don't know about that.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like something that's set in stone.
Well, because they're also people are like, oh yeah, the Eagles have 2 second-round picks. We'll just trade one for Le'Veon Bell or David Johnson. Like, I don't know if they're going to do that.
Jordan Howard rumors. There's a lot of weird rumors floating around right now.
The Le'Veon Bell one made sense because they could trade both second rounders, and then at worst case scenario they get a third if Bell left. LaShawn McCoy makes more sense if they give up less and don't give up a second rounder because it's honestly surprising the Bills have held on to him at this point anyway.
Shady does make the most sense. I think the second round pick is way too much to give up for Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If they could do it for less, I want to give up a second rounder for LaShawn McCoy at this point.
No, I know. But also for Le'Veon Bell, too. I wouldn't give up a second round pick for a guy who's going to walk at the end of the year. That seems crazy.
Yeah, you don't know that he's going to. I think that if you're going to go to a team that was just in the Super Bowl, that just won the Super Bowl, and that it has look how long this roster has, 80% of it signed up for the next 3 years. I think you might be able to convince Le'Veon Bell. Plus, it's not that far away from where he was just playing.
Yeah, I just don't think Doug Peterson would want to sign Le'Veon Bell to a long-term deal. I just think he's
why? Because he can't go committee?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think he's the antithesis of what he believes about running backs. I think he has running back value and how that works within the cap down to a T. Like, that's one of the best parts of Doug Peterson's coaching philosophy. I think it'd be great if you're gifted him this season, but I don't really think he fits with that coach.
All right, so if I'm thinking about, like, Freeman, which Atlanta running back would you play, Jake?
Freeman.
Yeah.
Freeman. I have Freeman at 17. Where do I have Coleman? I have Coleman at 32. Freeman even looked better last week.
Yeah, I mean, he looked healthy.
He looked better, but he still didn't look like 100% Freeman. Like I think that he was kind of getting back into it. I expect better this week.
And there's also they were still using Ito Smith. I think he played like 17% of the snaps.
Yeah, it was 39, 38,
3 carries, 1 touchdown.
Yeah, like is he like their goal line back now? Because he did this the week before too.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say, I have no idea. I really don't.
I was going to say, this is my legitimate concern because it's the Devonta Freeman. He wants to go head first into everything, and maybe they're forcing the issue in the fact of like, all right, well, if you're not going to stop doing that, we're not going to risk you at the goal line.
Maybe. The Cam Newton theory?
Yeah, well, the Cam Newton theory where they actually have somebody to replace him with.
Yeah.
So in terms of the actual overall rankings, I think once you go 1 to 14, those are the 14 guys that are must starts. And then you get into tricky territory. I think down to Carlos Hyde, I'm not going to be too concerned that he wasn't able to get much going against Baltimore. I think he can get stuff going against the Chargers. He's still their lead guy, although Duke played the majority of the snaps last week. I think that's more of an aberration than anything. Then you get into Cook, and then Howard, Freeman, Thompson, Carson, Lewis. Those guys are still crapshoots. I don't know how healthy Cook is, but it looks like he's going to play.
If Cook practices Thursday, if we get an advanced practice where it's not just he showed up Friday for a limited part, if he's actually practicing Thursday and Friday, I would say he's a must start because the Arizona Cardinals are only second to the Lions and giving up for running backs.
Yeah, I will say some of that is script dependent. Not that they're going to change their script anytime soon. I mean, I think they've had 5 rushing attempts more per game against them than any other opponent, and that speaks more to their offense and their defense. But you play Dalvin Cook because he's Dalvin Cook, and if he's actually active, you assume he's going to get the lion's share of the work. But I don't think he's an RB1 for me or anything just because of the matchup. I still have serious concerns about his health. I have serious concerns about his offensive line.
Hitting you with your daily dose of NBA ADP talk right now with Karin Phillips of the New York Daily News and Action Matt LaMarca from the Action Network, which you can get where, Matt?
The iTunes store, Apple store, and the Android market.
Wow.
Very good.
Man, Matt, way to redeem yourself from yesterday. I'm really proud of you, man.
So good. You've been studying.
Ryan.
Yeah.
I did my homework in preparation for today's show.
Proud
well
of you,
done.
man.
I'm sure your bosses at the Action Network appreciate you.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we are looking at guys in the 20 to 40 range here. Are the following average draft positions too high, too low, or just right? So, Karin, Jazz guard, Donovan Mitchell, how's an ADP of 22 sound for you?
Sounds pretty good to me. I personally would take him a little higher, but 22 sounds just about the right spot. Be interested to see what happens with him this season, though, in terms of production and his fantasy numbers, seeing that I'm always a little weary of guys who have great first years or great rookie years, and seeing how they adjust to their sophomore year when they're the focal point of a scouting report. So while his numbers may fluctuate a little bit, I still think that guy's a stud, so I like where he's at.
Yeah, Matt has the tools to be one of the top guard commodities in all of fantasy hoops. So how do you feel about an ADP here of 22?
I think it's a touch high. He was phenomenal as a rookie. I'm not going to argue that point, but he just doesn't offer a very diverse skill set at this point. He can score the basketball and he's going to give you some threes, but that's really about it. You know, he averaged less than 4 assists per game, less than 4 rebounds per game. He's good with steals, but he's not going to pile up anything else in terms of blocks or, percentages. I'd feel much more comfortable drafting him, in the late 20s. I think playing with a team that's as good as the Jazz, they still have Ricky Rubio. They still have good role players like Joe Ingles and Rudy Gobert in the post. So I think that kind of caps his upside for me. I think 22 is a touch high.
But do you know why the Jazz are that good? Yeah. Because of Donovan Mitchell.
For sure. To me, he's more valuable as a real basketball player than a fantasy asset.
We're not interested in the real sports thing. All right, Pelicans guard Drew Holiday with an ADP of 26. Where do you sit on this one, Matt?
Oh, man, give me all the Drew Holiday at 27. This is just a super bargain. He finished 11th on the player radar last season, so I think he's got huge upside at this price tag. In games with DeMarcus Cousins out of the lineup, he averaged 19.9 points, 7.4 assists, and 4.9 rebounds per 36 minutes. So he does just a lot. The difference for me between him and a guy like Mitchell is he can give you the scoring and the peripheral stats. So I really like him. He also shot just 33.7% from 3 last season. That was a career low for him. He's apparently been putting in a lot of work this offseason trying to get that 3-point shot back. So if he can improve that 3-point jumper, I think he's got just huge upside. He could be a top 10 fantasy player.
Yeah, so I did say ADP of 26. Are you still as confident even though it's not 27?
Sure.
Okay, cool. We'll
Same
stay
thing.
with it. Same thing.
Close enough.
Karin, how do you feel? 26, 27,
Yeah, one of those numbers over 25. I'm taking Drew Holiday just because this is going to be an interesting year for him. Like you said, Boogie Cousins is gone, so the pecking order is going to go Anthony Davis, Drew Holiday, and we saw how good that team was in the playoffs and how they ran Portland out the gym. But another interesting thing on why his numbers might go up is that he's probably going to transition to the point guard role full time with Rondo being gone, and there's some talk that they might put rookie Frank Jackson at the 2, which means that Drew Holiday is going to have the ball in his hands a lot, which means his assist numbers can go up, going to Anthony Davis's. And he's also going to have to put up some more threes and maybe get some more buckets. So I would definitely take him at this number. So I'm expecting a big year from him because I'm expecting the Pelicans to make the playoffs again, but even be a higher seed than they were last year.
All right, well, what about Blake Griffin in Detroit? An average draft position of 35, Karin. Is that something you might be interested in? He's got a new coach.
Keep in mind there were rumors that he was at one point involved with Kendall Jenner, so there is the Kardashian curse concern.
And no, you know what?
Just
That's a
saying.
very good point,
Yeah,
Jesse.
I want to throw that in there.
You should consider that before
Consider
drafting
that.
this guy. We got a hot take. You got the sweatometer
Let's
going.
go! Sweatometer.
All right, you're good. You can go
All right, I'll
home
leave.
now.
Thanks, guys.
So, Karin, I forgot what I asked you.
Yeah.
About Blake Griffin.
Oh, yeah, an ADP
listen,
of 35.
As funny as that Kendall Kardashian thing is, it's kind of true. If we pay attention to all the athletes' lives, they're destroyed.
It's true.
But I'm staying away from Blake Griffin just because there's nothing in Detroit that really exploits what Blake Griffin does, and being a native Michigander catching games last year, his game was just kind of stuck in this weird phase, and we really don't know what that team's going to do, what the offense is going to look like. They very badly need better point guard play, and to let a guy like Luke Kennard play more so that he can shoot, because that team is really weird with him and Drummond. It sounds like a really good like late 80s Twin Towers duo, but in this new NBA era, like I just don't like what Detroit's doing or what you do with Blake Griffin in that offense.
Matt, his health makes him a risky fantasy pick each year. He's played in less than 70 games in every season since 14-15, so an ADP of 35. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, it's a boomer bust situation. Like he's either going to beat 35 or he's going to play, 50 games and he'll be well below it. So it really comes down to just how much risk you're willing to take on. Personally, I think he might be worth a shot at 35. He's just such a well-rounded player. He averaged 26-6 with the Pistons last season, so he definitely can fill up the stat sheet for you. And piggybacking off Karen's point here, I think he's going to be sort of the offensive focal point for Dwayne Casey's offense this season. He's going to be like the primary distributor of the basketball, and we've seen him make it work with a traditional center before. He spent most of his career playing next to DeAndre Jordan. So I think that he can still find a way to get Andre Drummond involved with lobs and things like that. The big knock is obviously the health and the fact that he shot so many three-pointers last season that it dragged down his field goal percentage pretty drastically. But there are very few guys that can, give you 20 points and at least 5 assists and rebounds going in this range. So I think it's a good risk, but obviously it could blow up in your face as well.
All right, wrapping up with the reigning world champion Klay Thompson with the Warriors. Feeling pretty good about an ADP of 39, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like we know exactly what Klay Thompson is at this point. He's going to score. He's going to hit three-pointers. And he's going to do it pretty efficiently. But that's really all he's going to do. He doesn't get to the free throw line. He doesn't rack up defensive stats. He doesn't distribute the basketball. He really is just the epitome of a three-point shooter and scorer. He finished 38th on the player radar last season, so I think this price is about right for him. Just don't expect a ton of upside from him when you draft him.
Karin, 39, what do you think?
I like it, and it's so weird to hear him break down Klay Thompson's game because everything he said is correct. But it's just different in real life when you watch him play. Like, he's one of the best defenders in the league on the perimeter, but he doesn't necessarily get a lot of steals. So you can't really value that in fantasy. And why I think he could create an offense and get more assists if he was on another team when he's the focal point. And the way that the Golden State Warriors are built and the way they run their offense, his job is just to shoot wide open threes because he's one of the greatest shooters we've ever seen. So 39 is pretty much the perfect place to take him.
Really good stuff, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Matt, way to know where you work and how to get your app. And Karin, we appreciate all your knowledge that you add to the program as well.
Every time. All right, one more go around with the NFL trio of Reed Fowler, Steve Buchanan, and Gary and Thorne. And we're playing some NFL spin move, a time in which we put a fantasy spin on the league's top stories.
All right, starting with Philadelphia, looking to replace Jay Ajayi. And reports surfaced this week that the Eagles have asked Buffalo about LaShawn McCoy's availability, a familiar face there. Steven, how would you feel about a trade, and how would a trade to Philly improve Shady's fantasy value here?
That's like someone asked me if I want to go to Qdoba. I'm like, yes, obviously. So obviously a trade would be great from McCoy. Look, it's hard to get any traction when your team doesn't win and you're always playing from behind. You're not going to get the carries. He got double-digit carries last week. Finally. Before then he was averaging 7 a game. He's just not being utilized at all. He's not catching anything. He's got a decent matchup this week against the Texans, but if they start getting up big, you're not going to see a lot of McCoy. He's a much better player than he's showing right now. He needs to go somewhere else and finally use that talent. Truly, right now, he's not even on the fantasy radar for me, which is crazy to think. 2 years ago, this guy was almost a must-play every single week. So it's just he needs to get out of there.
Not really on the fantasy radar for Steve, but Reed, what about you? How would a trade to Philly improve Shady's fantasy value? Let's keep in mind, though, the Bills here 2-3. I don't know if they're ready to throw in the towel just yet.
Yeah, I think when you look at Shady McCoy's value, right now there is none. Steve's right, and over under on how many times that Qdoba will be mentioned on this program. I'm thinking the over.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's the last time I've heard Qdoba, or first time I've heard Qdoba in a while. But going back to the trade, what I like this too, or linking this to, is Jay Ajayi's trade from the Dolphins last year to the Eagles. You look at some of the concerns for Shady McCoy. It's not just the Bills, but also he's had some wear and tear over the last 5 years since he's been away from Philly. So if I were a Shady McCoy owner in season long, after that first productive game, if he goes back to Philly, trade him off, because 5 years ago he was productive. But it's a lot of wear and tear, like Steve was saying, on a Buffalo team that really hasn't been good for a long time when they've had a guy like Shady McCoy. So if I do have him, yes, this builds momentum to potentially get Shady McCoy off your team, because even then he might have 1-2 good games. Doug Peterson, like Darren has said before, Doug Peterson never features one back. So even if he's there, he's still going to be in a committee. So I just don't like his future outlook, but it definitely points upwards if he's in Philly.
All right, Gary, and a lot of wear and tear on LaShawn McCoy. Let's speak hypothetically here. What if maybe a trade to Philly? How would that improve his fantasy value?
I think it's important to stress what he's coming from, because as both these guys have pointed out, you can't go lower than rock bottom. So he would have more value. Would I all of a sudden love LaShawn McCoy? No, because Doug Peterson is the Bernie Sanders of football. He runs a socialist backfield. Everyone gets a touch. Like, Josh Adams got a touch with 3 other active running backs last week. Like, look, I think from a real life football perspective, Doug Peterson is onto something here. Like, he's got a Super Bowl ring to prove it at this point, but this is what everyone talks about when we said the Giants shouldn't have drafted Saquon Barkley. Just get fresh legs in there. Keep guys active. Keep guys into it. Like, you don't need a bell cow back, and he's figured that out. And I think the fact that it's been validated, he's not changing that just if LaShawn McCoy walks through those doors.
All right, guys, Steelers running back Ben Roethlisberger saying if and when Le'Veon Bell returns, James Conner still deserves to be on the field. But realistically, Breed, how much would a Bell return impact Conner's fantasy relevance? Stop laughing, Emerson.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be fools to think that it doesn't hurt Conner's. And Big Ben's, that's what he has to say, right? I mean, this guy's producing. He's producing in terms of filling in for a guy like Lev Bell that obviously is one of the top running backs. Even going back to his second year after rookie, he's a top 5 guy in rush attempts when he's on the field. So, of course, he's going to eat into that. Once Conner has a week like 3 or 4 and Bell comes back, Bell's going to be the guy, especially if they want to win. They want to use as much as they can to get to a potential Super Bowl, because they haven't won one with these guys yet. And that's pretty bad in my estimation. So once he comes back, if Conner has one bad game, for instance, I think Bell gets back into this bell cow role, and that's that for Conner.
I mean, Steve, right now Conner ranks 3rd on the team with 28 targets and 22 receptions. But if Lev Bell returns, is that all going out the window?
I mean, at the end of the day, you have Bell on your team. You're going to use Bell. Although the Falcons just refuse to use Julio Jones, so maybe I'm just completely wrong. But I mean, truly, I mean, Conner has done a great job of carving out some sort of workload for him if and when Bell comes back. But what does that really realistically come down to? Maybe it's an 80-20 snap share, 75-25 for Bell. So he'll be on the field. It's just going to be much less. But yeah, he definitely has made his mark here that he's capable of taking some of the workload. But you know, like I said, you have Bell, you're going to use Bell.
Gary, and do you agree with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to how coaches generally utilize their running backs. And just like Doug Peterson is consistent in his usage, so is Mike Tomlin. Like, the reason we liked James Conner as possibly the best handcuff back in football this season, even in a vacuum, was just we knew if he ever got the shot, he was walking into a role where he was going to see 90% of the snaps, 100% of the running back touches on any given week. I think we get wrapped up in coach speak sometimes, and you know, when the rubber hits the road, they kind of just have to make a decision. We saw this last week with the Bengals and Marvin Lewis, who said he wasn't going to use Joe Mixon, and they're down 17 points, and it's like, well, crap, we got to use Joe Mixon, and he gets a career high in touches. So I think that while it's nice he's saying this, and I think Reed's right, this is something Ben has to kind of say right now, just to be politically correct within that locker room. If Lev Bell's back and he's 100%, I think by like week 10, he's got, again, an 80-85% share in this offense.
Guys, we have 90 seconds left in this show. This will be the last question. Make it quick. Ahead of tomorrow night's Thursday night matchup between the Eagles and Giants, Philadelphia defensive end Michael Bennett is praising New York's Saquon Barkley, saying he has the shiftiness and quick feet like Marshawn Lynch, the balance like LaShawn McCoy, and speed like the newest Jacksonville Jaguar, Jamal Charles. Reed, do you see a big night for Barkley tomorrow?
Yeah, guys, keep it quick because now we have 10 seconds left.
Yeah, exactly. I see effective, not a big night. He's got big games, or he's decent games against top 5 defenses like Jacksonville, New Orleans. So effective, but not a big game.
Gary, an answer, please.
Yeah, the Philadelphia defensive line is just so good against the run. I like him, but if you're looking at that two-pronged Giants offense, I'd much rather give the 1.5 times value to Odell Beckham.
Steve, we have 40 seconds. Just take your time.
Odell Beckham breakout party, Jalen Mills. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. If Eli's going to save his career, here's the game. Throw to Beckham. He's being covered by Mills. He's back. He's back. Eli's back. Forget Barkley.
He's
Wonderful,
back,
dudes. Maybe we'll have you all back tomorrow night to talk about that showdown mode between those two teams.
We definitely will. I'm Jessie. He's Emerson. This is The Sweat. We'll be back tomorrow at 6. See you later.
Deuces.